What's going on, guys? So this guide right here is going to be kind of an advanced guide for healing. I don't really want to cover the basics of like, oh, don't overheal your targets and shit like that. There's plenty of information out there for how to heal effectively. So walking into this, I hope you understand how to not let people fucking die, because I'm not going to be covering that so much. This is going to be how to go the extra mile in your lower level instances. Basically, lower level dungeons are fundamentally different from raids in a lot of ways. There's not nearly as much damage going out, which means that instead of just standing around with your thumb up your ass, there's things that you can be doing to maximize your efficiency in these groups and basically increase your experience gains by a substantial amount, actually. All right, first things first, don't heal people. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if you feel the need to constantly top people off the second they take damage, you're actually being rather inefficient with your resources, because you're constantly interrupting your spirit regen just to heal somebody who really isn't in danger all that much. You should be casting all your heals in like chunks. That way you're getting as much spirit regen as possible. I like to think that a good healer knows what's going to happen a few seconds before it actually does, because you're aware of who really is in danger, who's taking damage, who's about to take damage, and stuff like that. And if you can get that awareness through your head, you're going to be able to save a lot of mana by just allowing that spirit regen to truly do its job and go crazy on your mana bar. So, you need to find a comfortable balance between making sure that people don't feel like they're in danger, even if they're not, and allowing your spirit regen to really do its job. And finding that sweet spot is really going to save you a lot of drinking time, and it's going to make you look very competent as a healer, and basically give your group the confidence to keep pushing forward without having to wait for you to drink, or keep pushing forward despite their health bars. On the subject of mana management, let's talk about drinking here real quick. So ultimately, you are going to have to drink in these lower level dungeons. It's unavoidable that at some point you're going to need to refill on mana. But that doesn't mean that your group needs to completely stop and wait for you to fill up. Just the way that combat works in Classic WoW, you don't really enter combat until you yourself start to engage in the fight. So what that means is that you can position yourself in such a way that you are able to drink while your group is clearing the next trash pack. A lot of the times when I'm running through these lower level dungeons, I'm actually the first one to be up forward and ready to make the next pull. And the reason for that is that I can plop myself down right in front of that pack and start drinking, and the group can pull and continue doing their damage and stuff like that. And I'm essentially manaing up and spending my time out of combat while we're still getting some shit done. And this is a good practice to get into, and it's going to reduce the time that you just have fucking 5 people standing around. Be the first one to the next pull. Sit yourself down right in front of the fucking mobs and drink right in front of their face. Just maximum disrespect their asses. And this is a way of doubling up your downtime while still clearing through the instance. So now that we're managing our mana effectively, let's talk about how to burn through that shit. And the first spell that we want to really be mixing into our rotation is going to be Dispelling. So in a lot of these lower level instances, mobs put out, various curses or magic debuffs, which basically incapacitate some of your DPS, or perhaps even, just reduce their damage done by a little bit. And it is worth it to immediately dispel that shit so that your DPS can start doing their job once again. As an example, like in Wailing Caverns, the Druids of the Fang, they put people to sleep for like 9 seconds. And if your rogue is sitting in sleep for 9 seconds, that's 9 whole seconds of their damage that is just completely gone. So it's worth it for you to, immediately dispel them, even if it's going to interrupt your mana for 5 ticks. And that's going to drastically increase the speed at which you're killing the mob packs. Even for stuff like in Shadowfang Keep, once you get up onto the wall and those guards do that fucking annoying curse that reduces like weapon skill damage or weapon skill by like 100, get that shit off your DPS right away. They're gonna thank you for it. They're gonna be doing a lot more damage. Yes, you are going to be interrupting your mana per 5, but that's why we know how to drink effectively, so that we're reducing our downtime. So anytime there is a relevant debuff on your party members that is reducing the damage that is done, you need to take that shit off of them. And you need to make sure that they're putting out the full damage that their class is capable of. And that's going to increase the speed at which you're grinding through these packs. So the second thing that we can be doing with our excess mana is going to be utility spells. So this depends on, you know, which class you're playing or whatever, but if we take shamans for instance, we have interrupts. We can be earth-shocking trash mobs. In a lot of these lower level instances, shit is going to try to heal itself with a really long cast time, and you can't really depend on your DPS interrupting that. If they are, then you know what, go ahead and let them do it. But if not, it's better off for me to, you know, earth shock a mob and interrupt that cast spell in order to power through that trash quickly. Or, you know, if you're a druid, throw out a hibernate on an extra beast so that your group focuses down targets a little bit quicker. And, you know, these utility spells, they're going to do things like reduce the healing that mobs are doing with Earthshock, or it's going to reduce the damage that your group is taking with some crowd control abilities like Hammer of Justice or Hibernate. And again, you're going to be interrupting your mana per 5, but ultimately it is going to be worth it. So familiarize yourself with whatever your class's utility spells are, and check those out in a fight. See how it feels. Maybe it's not worth it to sleep, you know, some non-elite beast or some shit like that. Really just feel it out as you go along, but you want to make sure that you're mixing in utility spells into your rotation in order to increase the speed at which we're getting through this shit. And the final thing that I want to talk about as a healer is putting out that damage. You do a surprising amount of damage in these lower level instances because, you know, the DPS classes haven't scaled up to their maximum potential of like the raid DPS that they get later. You actually compete pretty well with damage as a healer, even if it's just, you know, wanding as a priest or melee attacking as a shaman. You'll find that if you are weaving in attacks effectively, you're going to be doing like 15 or 20% of your group's damage in these lower level dungeons. And if you are getting through instances 20% faster, that is a fucking huge speed increase on your dungeons. And as I've talked about, you already have a lot of standing around, so you might as well be throwing out that damage. And this kind of brings me into my next point as a healer. I didn't really know where to mix this into the video, so I think I'm just going to put this in here. You don't have to be your class's healing spec in order to heal these lower level dungeons. Being your healing spec doesn't really matter all that much up until I would say around like 40 to 45, because that's when you start to get, you know, more critical healing abilities, such as like Mana Tide Totem or, you know, Powered Fusion and that Spirit buff for priests and stuff like that. So I would actually argue that prior to 40, you're better off healing as your damage spec, simply because a lot of the lower level healing talents aren't really all that impactful. Like if you take a look at shamans, for instance, 25% mana off of your totems, it just feels bad to like put talent points into that during lower level dungeoning if that's really not going to increase the speed at which you're running through these dungeons. And I would argue that you are actually better off healing with points into like Call of Flame in the elemental tree or Flurry and enhancement and stuff like that. Because like I said, part of your job as a healer in these dungeons is to contribute to the damage. That's significantly picking up the speed of your runs. So prior to 40, I would suggest healing dungeons as your damaging spec. Not only is that going to make these runs go faster, but it feels bad to level with resto talents and shit like that. So let's say that you don't want a dungeon while leveling. You're gonna find that it's easier to level off as your damage spec. And that is going to conclude my tips for powering through these low level dungeons quickly. And I hope that you actually have more fun playing through this playstyle. It's a lot more of an engaging gameplay because you're constantly just thinking, what can I do to be more effective in these dungeons? And I think that it makes you a better player overall. You're integrating stuff in like interrupting, even though that's not technically your job, dispelling quickly and shit like that, and it's gonna make you a better player by learning some of these principles even in these lower level dungeons. I hope that this guide was helpful for you. I hope that it wasn't too like advanced for newer healers and shit like that. And if it is, and you would like me to make a guide on just the very basics and fundamentals of healing, I would be more than happy to do that shit for you. So I hope that you learned a thing or two. Hope that you're switching your mentality as a healer, and I hope that you level quick, man. Healing dungeons is fun when you heal this way, and I hope that you feel that way too once you start integrating these little gameplay tips into your own playstyle. So thank you guys for watching this video all the way through. I'm going to be posting WoW content a lot more on this channel, specifically healing content, because that's what I fucking love for. That's what I was born to do. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more of this type of shit, and have a great day.